City of Stevens Point Plan Commission meeting, recorded August 7, 2023.
It's 6 o'clock. I'll go ahead and call the August 7th, 2023 City Plan Commission meeting to order. Mayor Wiesa is excused this evening, so I'll open by welcoming Mike Beacom to the commission. Mike is on Zoom for this first meeting of his, but he replaces Commissioner Ilton's term, expiring, I believe, in 2 years. So with that, I will begin with the roll call. Wiesa's excused. Kneebone?
Here.
Arnson's excused. Beacom?
Here.
Cooper?
Here.
Rice?
Here.
Schuler? Here. Okay, we do have a quorum. Because we don't technically have a chair, I'll go ahead and open the nominations for chair. Alder.
I'll nominate Commissioner Cooper.
Nomination? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Third and final time, any other nominations? Seeing none, all those in favor of Commissioner Cooper as acting chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, this is your problem now, Commissioner.
I don't think it's much of a problem tonight. All right. Now, agenda item number 2 is report of the July 6, 2023 meeting of the City Plan Commission. Provided in your packet. Questions, comments, or a motion?
Move to approve.
You have a second?
Yep.
Seconded by Rice. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Oops, I'm sorry, I should wait for Mike.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Agenda item 3 is a public hearing and action on a request from Nathan Lucht. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Okay. Lucht for a conditional use permit to construct a detached garage using setback requirements of the RTND Traditional Neighborhood Overlay District for the property located at 1919 Division Street, parcel identified, consistent with Chapter 23.02, Sub 1, Sub H, Sub 3.
Thank you, Chair. So the request before you all this evening is for the applicant to construct a 480 square foot detached garage along the north lot line near the north end of the subject property, as you can see on the image on the right-hand side of the screen. This proposed garage would have a 1 foot side yard setback off of that north lot line if approved. Now, generally speaking, anytime somebody looks to construct a detached garage, there's generally 3 options for this area in terms of what type of setbacks are required. The first of which is to meet the principal structure setback requirements for that zoning designation of the property in question. In this one, for example, that minimum setback would be 7.5 feet from the north lot line, not the 1 foot that's being requested. You know, I'll be blunt, this first option is rarely, if ever, utilized, more because the second option that's listed on the screen is actually a setback exemption in our zoning code that says you can have a minimum 3 foot side and rear yard setback for a detached garage, provided that there's some separation between the garage and the house, and you meet maximum height requirements. For the third option that's on the screen, and this is going to be unique more towards the traditional neighborhood overlay district, is to allow for a minimum 1 foot side and rear yard setback and then a 12-foot street setback. So on the next slide, you can see just general location of this traditional neighborhood overlay district. This would be the purple, pink shaded area relative to the city's municipal boundary. And then the image on the right-hand side of the screen shows really the purpose of this traditional neighborhood overlay district. A lot of these lots are more smaller, compact, existing structures generally are located closer to the lot line. So a few decades back when the city established this overlay district, one of the reasons for that was to allow for lesser setbacks for the construction of a detached garage like this. So on the slide, you see some pictures of the proposed detached garage. One thing I would just note is within the traditional neighborhood ordinance, there is a requirement essentially to have an overhead door facing the street, that you don't have a solid blank wall. So the applicant would meet this requirement. Overall, staff would recommend approval, and the applicant is here in person to answer any questions as well.
Okay, so first, before we open the public hearing, do any of the commissioners have clarifying questions for staff?
Just, do we know the current, basically the current setbacks of the existing or most recent garage, roughly?
applicant, if you know.
There's not a garage there right now.
Okay.
That was
Shed.
in the future you can see a garden shed.
Got it.
That was a 12 by 8 garden shed, and that has been removed, and it's just now a lot of dirt.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, with that, I will declare the public hearing open. If you are in person, please step up to the lectern, state your name and address for the record. If you're online, please come off mute or raise your hand. Public hearing is open. For a second time, the public hearing is open. And for a third and final time, the public hearing is open. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I will declare the public hearing closed and bring it back to the commission. Commissioners, we need a motion to get this to the floor.
I'll move to approve.
Okay, approved by Kneebone,
Second.
seconded by Beacom. Questions, discussion? All right.
Yeah, I guess I,
It's okay.
oh, sorry, Mary. Just questions and/or, potential concerns about the adjacent neighbors and what looks like there may be some fence lines. Curious if the city has any concerns about proximity to those fence lines, if there's any sort of kind of setback protocol in place, if the applicant has any kind of input or concerns about that as well, I'd be curious.
Yeah, before I defer to the applicant, I'll just note two quick things. One, you see in the agenda packet, the applicant did have some correspondence with the adjacent property owner. Typically, that's not required. However, it's always helpful on city staff's perspective to have that correspondence prior to this public meeting just to square away any potential concerns. As far as the 1 foot setback, generally speaking, that's not, it's very rare that a request of that small setback is presented. What I will say is the location of that garage has been looked at on my part with the fence line question that you referenced, and also from a building inspection standpoint, the adjacency of this proposed detached garage with the adjacent garages you see on the adjoining lots. And there's no concern from my end or for the building inspector's end. Applicant, if there's anything that you wanted to touch on further with that?
Why don't I have you come up to the lectern so we get you on? Yep, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so we have a great relationship with both the property to the north of us with Matt and Jackie, and then to the east of us. And their concern was the fence line, of course, because it would be fairly close to that. Their second comment to that was, well, we want to build a fence, because right now it says chain link. It's a little 3-foot chain link. And this garage would allow them to have their fence line, which I think is kind of ironic. We'll do all the work for that. They're all in favor for it. I did ask Adam about having them send letters in if it would help at all. And I did talk to both of them. And from your understanding, they have not reached out in regards to sending letters in. Because I guess I didn't tell them it was needed. It was just that would be nice for the committee to hear it. But yeah, as far as that fence line, it actually is 1 foot from the property line, so there would be a total of 2 feet and 3 inches in between the fence and the siding of the garage when we measured it out. So if that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for the applicant while he's up here? Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I just had a comment. The reason I live out on the far east side, way out there, is because most of the places we looked at in here don't have 2-car garages. So I think it absolutely will enhance their property to have a 2-car garage. So it's a good deal.
Okay, anything else? Okay, seeing none, the motion on the floor is to approve. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Agenda item 4 is a public hearing and action on a request from Priority Engineering LLC, representing Corda Stevens Point 2 LLC, for a conditional use permit to construct a car wash on an unaddressed parcel off of US Highway 10 East, parcel identified, consistent with Chapter 23.02, Sub 2, Sub E, Sub 3, Sub E.
Thank you, Chair. If you go on the next slide, the applicant is proposing to construct the 4,355 square foot car wash facility on the subject property. Some of these site amenities that are found within the site plan include 18 vacuum bays, paid kiosk stations at the entrance of the car wash facility, and then that required parking areas as well. Included in the packet outlines some information as to the proposed occupant of this car wash. Champion Express Car Wash would be the franchise operating this car wash facility. So just on the image, before I get to the details about the conditional use permit, I think it might be helpful to provide some perspective as to the location, since this is the second car wash request in the last, say, 3-4 months now. So the property identified in the picture is the subject property in question. The property just to the west is the Scooter's Coffee that's currently under development that was approved by this commission a few months back. Once you get farther west and southwest is the old Cops, old Walmart site that's being redeveloped into a chain of different tenants. So on the next slide, you see again the site plan that I mentioned, the proposed car wash on the northern side of the northern half of the subject property, parking and vacuum bays to the south, and then that aisle lane kind of wrapping around the south and east lot lines, leading up to the car wash near the north lot line. So as you can see, this request spans 2 agenda items, this first being the conditional use permit request. This is because car washes are conditional use within the B5 zoning district, the zoning designation for this property. The site plan review that I'll just talk about in more detail coming up in the next agenda item focuses more on the site development oriented topics such as setbacks, your building heights, queuing requirements, things like that. Some of the things I wanted to touch on briefly for the conditional use request. Number one, as you can see, one of the review standards focuses on architectural appeal, making sure that the appearance of this proposed building is aligned with really some of the architectural plans that are designated, broadly speaking, for new development here in the city. You can see in the report there are some initial concerns that staff had, namely for that north-facing wall. One of the objectives that we want to have with this proposed development, especially since this is in one of our entrances into the city, is making sure we don't have a solid blank wall, but we have additional variation in building material that's used, additional architectural features that are being utilized. So as you can see on a condition for the site plan review is that the applicant submits an updated architectural plan to city staff for review and approval. Since there's not a specific architectural plan for the Highway 10 corridor, there is some flexibility involved as to what staff would be open to. So we look forward to receiving an updated plan should this request be approved. Lastly, I'll just note before kicking it back to the commission is, again, going back to the broader location, you can see that there is some existing single-family development to the east and southeast. While this is within the town hall outside the city's jurisdiction, there is some careful planning that's necessary to make sure that there's appropriate land use controls in place for those 2 separate different uses, commercial use and the single-family residential uses. So you can see in the packet that there is a photometric plan showing very low light intensity provided. And you'll also see one of the conditions on the site plan review focusing on the need to retain about a 5-foot wooded strip of land along the east lot line to add some natural aesthetic to the area, but also assist in that noise and lighting buffer. So with that, staff would recommend approval, and we'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, any commissioners have questions, clarifying questions for staff before we open the public hearing?
Yes. Yeah, again, obviously it's second kind of car wash we've looked at in recent months with the addition of Tommy's on the north side, third. I guess my biggest concern or potential concern and what I'm curious to maybe hear from city staff is when we look at these, compared to other kind of retail locations, they have some unusual characteristics. I guess the first that maybe brings some concern to me is like the amount of water use. So curious, for some feedback about how, city utility staff looks at that, and if that's ever a concern, and how that affects kind of future plans in terms of providing services, especially, this is kind of on the far end of our probably our public service line in terms of water supply and wastewater on the far side of town. And then secondly, I don't know if we have any context about effectively repurposing this type of development versus kind of a black box retail development store. We've had, as any city, businesses kind of come and go. A retail store goes out of business, can be repurposed by lots of other types of businesses. I would imagine it's significantly more difficult for this type of development, but I could be wrong. So I'm curious if the city has any kind of context around that, and if there's anything to be thinking about and kind of planning for, like, even more distant future in terms of, is this best use of this property, and things of that concern. I guess thirdly, any concerns from city staff about proximity to, I know we've got like lowlands and wetlands kind of just east of this city boundary in the town of Holder.
So I can answer a few of those questions. There were no concerns from the water department. We just make sure that the laterals are appropriately sized. It is getting near the end of one of our water lines. However, the long-term intention is to loop the system out there and actually create a second pressure zone and a new water tower. And this area will be serviced by that new water tower. So right now there's really no concern from the public utilities end, and everything that occurs within the wash itself will get put into either recycled or put it back into the sanitary system, and there was no issue with our utilities department as that as well. So as it relates to redevelopment, I don't know of an instance where I've seen a car wash be redeveloped within that specific building. Typically the land is more desirable than the building itself, so it's not that uncommon that after a car wash has gone through its useful life cycle that they get bought, torn down, redeveloped into something else, as opposed to repurposing the building. But for the sake of, I guess, the conversation, we're always hopeful that these businesses will succeed. And is it highest and best use? As I've said before, probably not, but it is allowed within our zoning code.
Other questions for staff before we open the public hearing? Okay, with that, I will declare the public hearing open. If you are in person, please step up to the lectern and state your name and address for the record. If you are on Zoom, please come off of mute, raise your hand, to get our attention some other way. The public hearing is open.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, hey, this is Tony Murtis. I have the property directly east of the proposed car wash. I guess first off, I'm not here to stop any progress or anything coming out this way. That's not my intentions. If it was my first choice, a car wash would not be it, just due to the noise factor. Everybody heard the car washes when they come out and the dryers kick on, the blowers, 18 vacuums, I believe it was. That's just a lot of noise in a direct close proximity to where we are. The biggest thing I would ask, if it does get pushed through, if we can have a privacy barrier, a wall, something more than a 5-foot wooded area that really doesn't grow up very thick. I guess that's the biggest thing I'm looking for is, as I mentioned, I'm really not looking at stopping progress or anything. If it was my first choice, it would not be a car wash. But if it does get pushed through, I'd really appreciate some kind of a sound barrier between us.
Okay, thank you. Public hearing is open. For a second time, the public hearing is open. And for a third and final time, the public hearing is open. Seeing no one else wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed and bring it back to the commission. Commissioners, motion? I'll make a motion. I agree with staff. It's a use. Maybe it isn't what we're necessarily looking for, but it's a use. So I will move approval of the conditional use subject to staff recommended conditions.
Second.
Seconded by Schuler. Discussion.
used to be it was a Starbucks on every corner, now it's a car wash on every corner. I really do like adding a sound barrier. My concern was with the residences around there. We've gotten together on a couple of development items that have come up out in that area. I was concerned about the noise and about the light, the amount of light. And I'm just a little over 5 feet. I don't think that's a lot of room to have vegetative barrier. So if there would be some way we could add some kind of a sound suppression system, at least by the vacuums. I don't know if that would be possible, given the design, and maybe this isn't the right agenda item to do that.
It's the next one.
Well, either or, really. I mean, the thing with conditional use permits is you are trying to negate any negative impact. So you could add it as a condition that they install, let's say, a 6 or 8 foot fence along the east property line. That we've done that in the past. The Quick Trip on the north side, that's another example where we had them install a 6 foot tall vinyl fence with staff approval, and that's actually where the original 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. moratorium on car wash operation came from, was that because we were in a slightly similar situation where we had residential parcels directly west of where the proposed car wash was. That one was actually really close and up against the residential properties, so there was, I think, probably more concern from staff there, but I don't think it's inappropriate at this point if you'd like to add a condition that you include a 6 or 8 foot tall fence either along the property line or 5 feet in front of the property line to provide additional barrier.
Let's see, could I move to amend the
Do we
motion?
want
Is that how you
a
do
friendly
that?
amendment, or do we want to do a motion, a separate?
Probably just do a separate amendment.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So Mary, are you going to move to that effect?
Yeah, I would like to move to amend the motion, is that correct?
Correct.
To include the addition of a privacy wall or sound barrier type fencing on the east side to provide a better sound barrier for the residential properties. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's sufficient. That gives staff enough for
Yeah.
them to review. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Is there a second?
And I would second that amendment.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Okay, discussions on the amendment. Okay, so we're just voting on the amendment right now. So all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Okay, the amendment carries. So now we're back to the original motion on the approval of the conditional use permit,
As amended, correct.
as amended. Any further discussion on that? Okay, so that motion is to approve as amended, so all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries. So with that, related agenda item 5 is a request from Priority Engineering LLC, representing Court of Stevens Point 2 LLC for a site plan review to construct a car wash on an unaddressed parcel off of US Highway 10 East, parcel identified, consistent with Chapter 23.02, Sub 2, Sub E, Sub 5.
Thank you, Chair. So we've had a fair number of development projects along the Highway 10 corridor that had a similar requirement, a similar site plan review requirement as this. The reason for this requirement, the site plan review, is essentially any new development along the Highway 10 corridor requires a site plan review that focuses primarily on internal traffic flow within the property, access to and from the property in question, parking stalls, things like that, given the high traffic volume along the Highway 10 corridor. So again, the left image, you see the proposed site plan that we talked about last time, and then the image on the right, just wanted to touch on, is the proposed private driveway that will hook Elizabeth Avenue to the subject property. If you recall, during the Scooters development approval a few months back, it did reference the private driveway leading up to Scooter's east lot line, this would be the subject property's west lot line. As part of this development, they would be looking to extend that private driveway a little bit farther to the east, and then as a condition on the site plan review, construct a turnaround so it satisfies our largest fire truck apparatus. Otherwise, last thing I would note is just standard for other types of site plan reviews. There are queuing requirements that I talked about, minimum of 6 queuing spaces from the pay station to the entrance of the car wash. You can see that there are plenty of queuing spots, honestly probably significantly more than the last car wash approval that was brought before you all a few months back. And then lastly, landscaping plan. You can see pretty standard landscaping plan having some trees and shrubs along the parking rows with the added condition about having some additional landscaping along the vacuum stations. So staff would recommend approval subject to those 11 conditions that's found on the staff report.
Okay. Do we have a motion from the commission to bring this to the floor?
Move to approve.
Move to
With
approve.
the comments by staff.
Move to approve by Schuler. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Rice. Discussion from the commission.
I'd have one question, I guess, related to Alder Kneebone's, one of her things she mentioned, and my own curiosity. For the site during non-operating hours, do you have any idea what the lighting will be overnight?
We do have, I'll defer to you.
Name and address. So Bon Fitzgerald from Priority Engineering. Address would be 23208 Emerson Way, Land O'Lakes, Florida. So to speak about the lighting, the site will have the ability to shut the lights down throughout the whole parking lot and facility after operating hours. So to take any doubt away from that.
Okay, and it's 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. hours of operation proposed?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions for the
Thank you.
applicant while he's up here? Thank you. Questions, anyone on Zoom? Anyone in the audience? Okay, with that, the motion on the floor is to approve with staff recommended conditions. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Agenda item 6 is a request from Kelsey Hayes, representing Ross Dress for Less, for a sign variance to install one wall sign exceeding maximum size restrictions on the property located at 5601 US Highway 10 East, parcel identified, consistent with Chapter 25.14. Adam?
Thank you, Chair. Last month, the commission reviewed a sign variance request for Ross Dress for Less, installing a 314 square foot wall sign. To provide some background as to really the reason why that variance request was desired. So any commercial building with multiple tenants within that building, each tenant is permitted to have one wall sign at a size not to exceed 100 square feet. So naturally, any request to exceed that 100 square foot threshold would require that sign variance request if they would want to go forward with that. During the last Plan Commission meeting, there was some discussion as far as potentially granting, not granting the variance, or kicking it to the council with no recommendation. Ultimately, there was no recommendation that was sent over to the common council meeting on July 17th. On that July 17th council meeting, the council kicked it back to the commission and instructed staff to have some more dialogue with the applicant and the parties from Ross Dress for Less to really find that compromise square footage that would satisfy both parties. So with that, the agreed upon square footage was 220 square feet. That would equate to a ratio of 1.75 square feet per lineal storefront frontage. So you can see in the agenda packet, you can see the total amount of frontage for that tenant space, be that times the 1.75 square feet. So again, here you can see the proposed wall sign, just more so just kind of changing the orientation of the lettering and then shrinking it down in size to better or more closely meet that 100 square foot threshold. like I said, staff is comfortable with that 220 square foot variance request and would recommend approval.
Okay. Commissioners, we have a motion to bring this to the floor, please.
I'll move to approve with staff recommendations.
We have a second?
Second.
Bryce? Questions? Jeff?
I guess I'm just curious if that 1.75 square feet per elevation, width of elevation, was that intended to become the new standard for this particular or these types of developments? Is it a function of distance from the road or where does this particular action take the rest of the tenants and anybody else in a similar situation?
Good question, Commissioner. The proposal that was put forth was done by staff. We were given direction from the council to find some compromise. We thought that that was a pretty reasonable compromise between the 100 square feet and the 318 that they had originally proposed. So I do think, after reviewing a few other sign ordinances as well, it's a fairly decent ratio, 1 1/4, 1.5 square foot based on lineal footage of the tenant space. I think that's probably a recommendation that'll come back from staff to this body for future changes within our sign code. And in fact, if you look at, the sign this is what's now being proposed, but compared to what was previously, it's definitely, I think, more appropriately scaled for the store frontage and better fits or better aligns with, I think, the rest of the facade that's on that specific development.
So I assume proportionality is it's the key to having it all look reasonably uniform. Okay, thank you.
Other questions, comments? Comments from the audience?
Hi, this is Katie from Blair Image Elements. I am quite curious, and I don't know if you can answer this question for me or not, or if this is specifically to share opinions on this, but if this is approved here, would the Common Council be able to meet? I believe that was something else that they had discussed during their meeting, is meeting quorum in order to grant this variance approval after this meeting today.
The original conversation was whether or not we would have a special council meeting to approve this. The conversation between staff and the developer came in really late last week, and so we earlier that week had called off the special council meeting because at that point we had not had an agreed upon variance. So it's unlikely that we would have a special council meeting. This will go to the regular council meeting on the 21st of August.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Questions? Okay, seeing none, the motion on the floor is to approve with staff recommended conditions. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Agenda item 7, director's report. Director.
Nothing substantial to report, really. It's been a very busy summer on our end. We did have another neighborhood meeting for the comprehensive plan update for the Gerke, Washington area. That was last week, Wednesday. Pretty well attended by the neighborhood. I would say probably 40, 50 people showed up. Had a really good kind of Q&A, back and forth conversation. I don't know if there was anything substantial that will come from that final meeting. A lot of it was just kind of asking questions about what's currently within the plan, what our thoughts are on a number of different things. And of course, whenever you have a public meeting, things kind of go off the rails at times. So we try to bring it back and focus on comp planning. That was probably the most substantial. So we would expect that will be at the September 7th Plan Commission meeting. And that's a friendly reminder that September 7th is the next Plan Commission meeting since Labor Day, and Plan Commission are kind of lining up a little wonky this year, as they actually do every year, now that I think about it. So I think with that, that's all I've got for you folks this evening.
Okay, questions for the director? Okay, with that, our agenda is exhausted and we stand adjourned at 6:34. Thank you.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.